Good afternoon. I'd like to call the September 12th, 2023 School Board Work Session to order. First, we have a staffing update from Dr. Huff.
Good afternoon, Ms. Coker, Ms. Heffron, members of the board, Dr. Darty. Pleased to be able to take a few moments to share with you this afternoon a staffing update as we begin the new school year. All of our classrooms are covered with VDOE certified teachers, annual substitutes, and long-term substitutes. So we were all ready to start the year. And about 95% of our classrooms are headed by licensed teachers, with many more folks who are on licensure pathways. Our daily substitute fill rate increased to 82% last school year, and that was an increase of 10% over the prior year and an increase of 17% over pandemic lows. And we know that was really important because that was an important working condition to teachers. And we're not finished yet, but we're pleased with our progress. And our active substitute pool also increased from 1,831 substitutes to 2,480, and that represents a 35% increase in a year. Our substitute pool is also a very important hiring pipeline for us as people, try out working in classrooms and maybe become interested in an annual sub position or in a licensed position or join a licensure pathway or become an instructional assistant or other forms of employment. We have about 1,600 more substitutes now than we did at our lowest point, and we hope to add about 650 more. We think that will get us to the ratio of where we need to be to have a healthy fill rate on a daily basis. And we're on track to right-size our substitute pool in 2024. We also have had some successes with filling vacancies. Our vacancy rate for our school-based food service positions has been reduced from 24% in 2022 to 13.8% in 2023. And this is week of September 1st data, so looking at the beginning of the school year to beginning of the school year. Our vacancy rate for instructional assistants has been reduced from 7.8% last year to 4% to start this year. And our vacancy rate for day porter custodians has been reduced from a little over 5% in 2022 to 3.9% in 2023. And of course, the year before is when we had the very large reduction in the day porter vacancy rate due to the implementation of the new salaries. Our bus driver recruiting funnel looks healthy in our metrics. As of September 5th, we had 81 people in training, classified as a trainee status, and we had 84, I believe, when I looked this morning. Another 48 in medical, another 30 in background check, 3 in offer stage, and interview referred 21. We're having another bus driver fair on September 19th at Bailey Bridge Middle School, and we already have 136 individuals signed up for that fair, so it looks like it's going to be another large fair similar to the one that we had in July. Another way that we're addressing our staffing is with innovations, and 2 that I'd like to highlight are Handshake and iTeach. Handshake is a software program for teacher recruitment, and college career centers use Handshake to kind of power their career centers. Over 1,400 colleges and universities use it. And students can opt in and let us know, what their major is or their GPA, where they would be interested in moving, or other, demographic information they might choose to share. And we have been able to use that software to send messages to 44,000 unique candidates. We've connected with 586 universities, and our team is very active in that software with the college market. It can be teacher education students, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be students in other majors that we need that would be an easy connect to a teacher pathway. And we are also using it when we go to college fairs to, I went to one college fair this year, and the student came up to me and said, your recruiter said you were here, and messaged me on Handshake. So we know that that's working and that college students are very active on that. I Teach is another program that we're participating in. It is a certification program that exists in other states. It's new to Virginia, and we are one of the first 24 counties to participate and have a partnership approved. It is an online asynchronous program. It is accredited by CAPE, which is the Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation. And that it's the only program that's not a college or a university that is accredited by CAPE. So this is another option for our teachers. They do offer praxis preparation in addition to content and pedagogy. We did host 3 events this summer regarding how to sign up in the particulars of I Teach. We've sent some reminder messages out to our annual substitutes and substitutes as well. We are still waiting for some clarity from the states on a couple of pretty big endorsement areas, elementary and special education, but we do have clarity on a lot of the K-12 content areas and on secondary content areas, and we are enrolling employees in that, or employees are choosing to enroll in that program. Another thing that we're doing this year is our Participate International Exchange Program. Participate is the largest provider of international exchange teachers in the United States, and they place over 700 teachers each year, and they've been operating cultural exchange programs for over 36 years. These are experienced licensed teachers from other countries who have engaged in training related to cultural differences regarding teaching in the U.S., and they were interviewed and selected by our principals, and they travel on a J-1 visa, which allows them to stay up to 5 years. Participate's average is 4.1 years of a stay. And it's through the Department of Labor, so there are a couple of cultural exchange activities that are required each year. For example, they might be sharing with us how education differs in their home country, or sharing that with their school community, or in a forum, for example. Our students, we believe, will experience several benefits from this. So one is they can become more knowledgeable about other cultures. We're bringing the world to our students, so we're really excited about that, and particularly as our students are really preparing for a global marketplace. And our schools volunteered, and they were selected regardless of socioeconomic status. And other school divisions that have participated in this program have experienced positive outcomes with student learning. And of course, it's also helping with our teacher shortage. We have 30 international teachers. They're called ambassador teachers, and they are teaching elementary, and they're teaching English learners, and they're teaching Spanish. Some teachers are traveling alone. The majority of our teachers are coming by themselves, but others are coming with spouses and families who are also part of our community. And we have 30 teachers with 9 countries represented: Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guyana, Jamaica, Mexico, Philippines, and Trinidad and Tobago. So variety of countries, and the program really had an exciting start. We have 10 schools who are participating this year, and those are listed here. We have elementary, middle, and high schools participating. And we also have a number of supports from the Participate program. They, for example, provide online instruction on how to adjust instructional strategies for U.S. students. They have a week of arrival orientation, which our teachers experienced in Washington, D.C. They will also have a follow-up conference on a weekend in October to kind of recap some additional strategies. They have an instructional coach who's based in Chesterfield, who's been out in our schools already, observing teachers and providing strategies and feedback. They participated in New Teacher Week, and they have school-based mentors, and they have local community advisors provided through Participate, and again, an annual conference through Participate Learning. So some opportunities for us are just a cultural exchange, exchanging teaching strategies, some student achievement benefits, as well as new friends and colleagues, and hopefully lifelong memories for everyone. We are also engaging in continuous improvements related to staffing. So we attended 26 teacher job fairs this year. A lot of people don't realize there are a lot fewer teacher job fairs than there used to be because there are fewer teacher candidates, but we are engaged in a number of those throughout Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic. We went to about 50 recruitment events. We hosted some ourselves and attended some elsewhere, and that includes not just teacher fairs, but fairs and events for all kinds of positions. And we filled almost 3,700 positions in a year. That included full-time, part-time, temporary, and substitutes. Some challenges that we continue to experience are attrition. We used to experience attrition primarily in May and June, but that has changed somewhat during the pandemic, and we experience some attrition now off time. We hope that it doesn't appear to be increasing a great deal over last year, and we should have those numbers available in October. We kind of take our picture September 30th and compare it to our student population, student demographics, and analyze that data. But it has been higher in some critical areas such as bus drivers and instructional assistants than in years prior to the pandemic. We are, of course, in a national teacher shortage environment, so that's always a challenge, and budget timing has differed this year, and so that's a challenge. And of course, our county continues to grow. Some strategies that we are using include licensure assistance. We offer licensure assistance for candidates, new hires, and employees, including annual substitutes, long-term substitutes, and daily substitutes. That's become more important as we have more people on licensure pathways or interested in licensure pathways, and we're increasingly dependent on career switchers to staff our classrooms as there are fewer people graduating from traditional teacher education programs. For example, we have assistance that helps with helping people sort out what are the salary and bonus differences between being an annual substitute and being a teacher on a licensure pathway, analyzing transcripts before, so they have a good idea that VDOE makes those final determinations, but we try to assist in advance of that, providing different pathways to licensure, praxis assessment information and where you find it, tuition assistance, budget permitting. We have events and school visits and one-to-one phone calls and emails, and this year we are trying to differentiate our contacts more. So the licensure specialist did presentations at the New Teacher Week, and they said they were standing room only presentations, and we've already been out to schools to kind of meet people where they are to provide information on licensure. And we also know that VDOE makes these final decisions, but people need help navigating those pathways. They can be somewhat complex, and they're different for everyone, depending on where they're starting. And some ways you can become licensed are through your college major, through a praxis content test, and then later take pedagogy courses, through a career switcher program, through experience, like with our career and technical pathways, and then there are approved alternatives such as I Teach. So we try to let people know about the variety of ways that they can become licensed and what might be some pathways that would match their credentials. Not all endorsements are available in all pathways, so it kind of ends up being individual guidance, and then sometimes there are questions for VDOE as well. This is an example of how becoming a licensed teacher and getting on that licensure pathway benefits our employees financially. There's a significant difference between the annual salary from being a licensed teacher on a licensure pathway as opposed to an annual substitute. Also, we have a location bonus again this year for our high needs locations. And we are also applying again this year for the RIPE grant. So if people do qualify for a licensure pathway by November 30th, and that position was vacant August 15th, they may qualify for this RIPE grant bonus through the state as well, and we will know more about that in the spring. We also received the RARS grant. I think all of the VUE grants start with R, related to recruitment and retention, but this one is allocated to tuition reimbursement. And certainly we have a lot of people taking a lot of courses to try to become licensed, and that's an additional $50,000 that we can use to reimburse them. And additional tuition assistance been budgeted to help career switchers who are working towards certification. Some strategies that we also use with instructional assistants, we had dedicated job fairs last year and this year. There were salary increases in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And the board supported differentiated salaries for IASCs in 2023. And we did have a reduction in vacancies in those positions, so there's some evidence that those efforts are helping. And I just made a slide of some of the external job fairs that we attended in the spring semester because I thought that the public might be interested in that and where you could likely find us on the recruiting trail. And we also wanted to include information about how to apply if anyone's watching or knows of someone who might be interested in a position with CCPS. And we kind of have what you can go through there, and if you need any assistance at all, you can contact our recruiting office at careers@ccpsnet.net to answer questions or give information on the status of your application. We know that every child deserves an outstanding education, and teachers are the most important school-related factor in children's educational outcomes. We know that our support positions are critical to ensure that children can benefit from classroom environments, and certainly the pandemic emphasized that point. And we know that we need to meet the moment with staffing, with innovation, continuous improvement, and strategy to ensure that our students have an outstanding educational experience. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huff. Board members, is there any discussion? Ms. Heffron?
Thank you. So I just was making some notes along the way. So would it be right to say 2,250 subs is kind of our goal overall for 2024? That was the 1,600 plus the 650?
I think our end game is actually 3,100.
All right.
Yeah, so I think we are at 2,400 now after people, were hired into positions. And I think we need to get to a little over 3,000. The Johns Hopkins study in 2016 suggested that you need one sub for every 1.57 teachers to consistently hit a 90% fill rate. And of course, some of that could have changed post-pandemic, but we're working towards that initial goal.
Wow, that's a big lift. Thank you for your work to get there. And shameless plug. So the Participate teachers, I wanted to thank everybody who supported, I know it's outside of your department, but the FACES team that supported that transition. And I do know that we have fantastic community partners that have come in and really wrapped their arms around these teachers and helped them settle in and feel welcome. And I'm just absolutely proud of the response from our community and from CCPS with these teachers. And then I guess my last question, which we may be getting ahead of ourselves, but so is there a plan to sustain and scale hiring to match projected student enrollment? Like to scale up, because we're going to need to, right? Do the same thing, do it all over again? Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
and we're continuously iterating our strategies. I mean, we met today on a new idea for a new event. So we do continuously iterate our strategies. We're already meeting with Participate regarding next year. So we're continuing to think ahead until we have all the positions filled.
I just want to thank you for all your hard work. I know that the teachers in the classrooms greatly appreciate, especially the hard work with the substitute and the fill rate there. One of the, I think, greatest tools that you can have to combat attrition and teachers leaving the profession is take stress off of them. And not having to cover teachers' classes, being able to use their planning periods effectively because they have substitutes in the building is one way to ensure that we protect the motivation, the morale, and keeping teachers that are currently on staff, to stay with us. So I just want to personally thank you for all that hard work to recognize that that substitute fill rate is it's critical on many levels, not just for the students in the classroom, but it's also for keeping our good qualified teachers in the classroom as well. So thanks for that. But then the IA fill rate, and that is another area that I think you've made huge leaps in, and I really, really appreciate that as well, because students benefit especially from the special ed assistance and the one-on-one aids, and our SPED teachers are so overwhelmed and overworked that those IA positions are so critical for them as well. So I really appreciate the work on the IA staffing, because, every little piece is like a piece of the puzzle, and in getting closer to the puzzle being completed, every one of those parts matter. And so thank you so much. They're very important roles.
Thank you.
Mr. Harder?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I just want to say thank you for you and your department's work on this. You really come leaps and bounds of really the situation we were looking at 2 years ago. I think you said something pretty interesting. I teach and career switcher seem to be the two hot things right now because we just don't have the participation from the colleges and universities of people participating in teacher prep. This is just kind of a thought. Do we do any type of like advertising on like LinkedIn or anything of that nature? Places where a lot of people go to. I know, like we talked before about like Monster and Indeed that we post on those places, but those places where there's always a lot of chats going on about people that maybe aren't necessarily happy with their careers or are always looking to network with other people that may have other opportunities for them. I know I've recommended to a number of people, over the last couple of years, but has there ever been any thought about that as far as like into the LinkedIn
Yes.
space? Or
Yes, we do have a LinkedIn recruiter license, and so you can follow us on LinkedIn. And we do engage on LinkedIn. It seems like Indeed is kind of our highest yield platform, but we have tried, Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and some different platforms. But we do have a presence on Indeed, and we do have the recruiter license, and we have contacted, for example, passive candidates on LinkedIn. We also have career switcher events, and those have been pretty popular. We had one kind of towards the early part of summer, end of spring, and we've been having a couple each year, and we've invited the approved career switcher programs in Virginia to come and have done like a presentation, shared information about licensure, and then given time for people to meet with the various career switcher programs to see if there might be one that matches their goals. And those have been pretty well attended as well.
awesome. All right, thank you.
Thank you for your work. I think in terms of keeping up with staffing needs, as someone who attended CBAC committee meetings, I don't know, way before I ever thought about running, we were behind with subs then, and so getting up to speed, aside from the explosive growth, right? So it's your we already were struggling, and then now we have explosive growth. So it's an incredible challenge, and you're doing an incredible job. So my questions are on the slide where it says 650 more substitutes needed. It says given sustained resources. So I'm assuming that includes, just since we only have a couple, the majority of us only have a couple more months left on the board, thinking to be explicit. So sustained resources, one thing that I think of is the increase in subrate salary. I would imagine sustained resources means that it's important to keep that salary increase. Do you feel that that's adequate, or looking with incremental change? Is there thoughts for incremental movements in future budgets? But just curious to go deeper in what does it mean by sustained resources?
Well, there have been a number of investments, as you know, in the substitute pool, and we did look at that as a really important working condition, and teachers were reporting that at budget town halls even prior to the pandemic. And so one of the investments that was made through ESSER was an individual who interviews substitutes all day long and gets substitutes into the pool faster. So that's something that has really helped us to be on track to hit our numbers, because we have applicants and large volumes of applicants, and we need to go through those and who's going to call us back and do interviews and guide them through onboarding processes, training modules, background checks before they're with students. Another thing, of course, the board has supported the high demand days, and that the data on that is, I'm sure you'll receive more data on it, but it's been really positive. I know we've reported on that each year with compensation. And then this year, we raised our average daily rate to be more in line with the Richmond area market for daily rates for substitutes for both teachers and instructional assistant substitutes. And I think that that's really important to stay in there with the market. And so those were the things I was thinking of when I said sustained resources. I know we appreciate the support and investment that's been made, and we think there's been a positive, measurable result.
Thank you. It's good to reiterate those, because they could go away, and then our progress will go away. So the other thing for the licensure pathway, Ms. Bailey mentioned the importance of special education and the need. Maybe that's another area also where, getting your endorsement in special education could be suggested as a way of building the ranks. And even, I know that we will pay for gifted endorsement, having CCPS pay for special education endorsement. I'm wondering kind of how special education endorsement is maybe built into the conversation as you have a chance to influence people who are new and maybe didn't think about this is an important area to add as you're pursuing the pathway.
Yes, we a couple of years ago we did a cohort that was financed through Title II for special ed IAs with their bachelor's degrees to get their teaching certification in special ed, and we also did a large cohort of teachers to get their adapted special ed certification a couple of years ago. And we actually are getting ready to offer, I don't think it will be 100% financed, but it'll be eligible for tuition reimbursement and the RARS grant, another cohort to get your initial courses for your provisional license in special ed. And we're going to be advertising that in the next 2 weeks. To our annual substitutes and our instructional assistants, but it's certainly open to any employee who might have an interest.
That is fantastic news. Then I guess my only other comment is on slide 21, we need a QR code so you can pause and go right to the application.
That's a great idea. I just want to say and echo thank you. You can tell your out-of-the-box thinking has paid some dividends over the years, so thank you so much for all that you do and all your department does to bring us the best of the best at CCPS.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a report from Mr. Meister on JLARC.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Dr. Doherty. Appreciate the opportunity today to come and talk to you a little bit about what was presented to the House and Senate subcommittee in late July, I believe it was. I teased this presentation a little bit when I spoke to you last month, but as I flip forward, first of all, what JLARC is, they are the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, and they were asked in early 2021 by the House and Senate to essentially evaluate the K-12 funding formula in Virginia. They looked at it from a number of different perspectives. I did my best to summarize here. This is a 200-plus page report, 70-page, that was actually presented to the subcommittee. I tried to do it in 20. I apologize if I've taken a shortcut here or there with their words, but I've done my best to capture what this particular committee did. So with that, I'll flip forward. What they found at the end of the day is that benchmarks are suggesting that Virginia schools receive less K-12 funding than, I'll just say, they should. The SOQ formula has some material flaws in it, including lack of clear rationale for assumptions, and doesn't appropriately account for high needs groups. On a positive side, they did affirm that the LCI, or Local Composite Index, is a valid metric, and they give that a thumbs up with a minor tweak here or there. And lastly, they recognize that other states, quite frankly, have simpler and better models that we should learn from and look at moving towards in the future. As well as looking at sort of what they found, they also took the step and started to form some recommendations. What you see here are some of the qualifications that they had on this. It's important to note that if you look at all the recommendations in totality for this report, it is $3 to $4 billion of state funding. So this is not something that we'll be able to do, or they will be able to do quickly. They do recommend some things for short term. They do recommend some things for longer term. Some items are more policy decision based. So they've taken a look at this that says this is where we want to go, but this isn't something we can get to overnight. In its totality, as I said, $3 to $4 billion at the state level. That would translate to, give or take, $200 to $300 million to CCPS. So the results of this do actually matter for CCPS, although this is going to take some time to actually implement. And in the most recent General Assembly approval, they did actually acknowledge this report and said we're going to look at this, and made it part of the budget deal that they will continue to evaluate this report as they go forward. So how I'm going to talk about this is largely the way JLARC did. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background, talk a little bit about some benchmarks that they put together, and lastly, their findings and recommendations. As I go into this, I did footnote on the bottom of each slide which slides I'm largely referencing from their roughly 80-page PowerPoint, so yourself or the public could go back and reference those as I go forward, had I taken a shortcut that they don't appreciate. To start with, the state is a major source of funding for K-12, not surprisingly. If you look across Virginia, it's about a little over $20 billion in K-12 funding. About 40%, $8 billion or so, comes from the state. Our percentage at CCPS is a little bit higher based on our LCI. And within that, a bulk of that, 84%, comes from this thing called the SOQ. This is where the bulk of the funding mechanism comes from, and quite frankly, where a lot of the confusion in our staffing models and actual funding formula will ultimately be derived from. So looking at what that SOQ funding formula is at a really high level, it starts with staffing ratios. Those are first created and looked at. Those are then multiplied by the enrollment at any given district. That would naturally equate to the number of staff that are needed. Those number of staff are then multiplied by a salary assumption. There's a lot of problems with that too. We'll get into that as we go forward, as well as some other assumptions that drive things like utilities or transportation costs, et cetera. That would equal the total SOQ funding requirement from the state. That total requirement is then multiplied by the local composite index to split that requirement between the state and the locality. You put that all together, that's the SOQ formula in a nutshell. There's probably a 3-hour working session to explain each of those pieces and how it actually works through. But at a high level, this is largely how it works. And this is give or take $400 million of CCPS funding comes through this means. JLARC did find, oh,
Can you
please.
just pause for a second, so the public can, just define SOQ for the public? So,
Sorry.
Sorry, I just think that might be
SOQ,
important.
SOQ is the standard of quality. It's what the state deems necessary for K-12 education, as defined in the staffing ratios largely. Thank you, Ms. Bailey. I use it so often. So the JLARC did take a step back. They do recognize that funding is really important. Funding matters, but it's not the only thing. They want to make sure that they did acknowledge that there are other factors that drive quality education, including controls and accountability within the district, as well as demographic factors that are outside of any district's control, whether that be percentage of poverty, or they mention adequacy of support at home, et cetera. So funding is critical. It's not the only thing, and they felt it important to mention that as well. So now looking at Virginia relative to several benchmarks that they put forward. First and foremost, they looked at it, how did we look versus other states and other states near us? And you can see here, Virginia funding, we're actually, the 50-state average is 14% higher than Virginia's funding on K-12. If you look at just the region, 4 to 5% higher than Virginia. If you look at our border states, you can see the bulk of the border states provide significantly more funding than Virginia does. I will note that most of this is based on FY20 data. Yes, there has been many initiatives in Virginia to increase funding to schools that aren't captured here. Many of those similar initiatives have happened in border states. I can't comment whether this chart would look similar if we're looking at FY22 or 23 data, but I think it's safe to say that the trends across these various states have generally moved in the same direction. The other item that they looked at was essentially benchmarks. They looked at three primarily. One is what is called here a cost function model. This is really an academic research that would suggest here's the funding that's necessary to achieve adequate or appropriate test results. That equaled, we're about 6% below where we need to be. They then looked at best practice models. Other states, like Virginia is doing here, looked at what do we need to do to adequately fund K-12 in our state. If you look at those models across the nation, 7 to 14% below. And lastly, they put together a work group of professionals that understand education and said, okay, what would you need to actually fund a school adequately? You can see their number 33% higher than what Virginia's actual level is. So this is all nice, but what does Virginia actually fund our schools at? You can see that here. The SOQ calculated amount is that first bar. That's the give or take $10.7 billion of funding in Virginia. If you then take a look at what is actually spent in Virginia, it's closer to $17 billion. So schools and localities are leaning in. They recognize that SOQ is inadequate and are providing more funding. If you look at those funding models that we talked about on the previous page, some of those benchmarks, you can see those are even higher, 70, 114%. To make this a little bit more real and put some Chesterfield numbers around this, a typical elementary school here has about 82 staff members. If we staffed at the SOQ level, that'd be 63. And middle school has about 118. If we staffed at the SOQ levels, that'd be closer to 84. High school, similarly, 187 versus 131. Assistant principal doesn't recognize the need at an elementary school until there's 900 kids. So a principal is supposed to manage 850 kids by themselves. That doesn't necessarily make sense. CSEs, coordinators of special education, that's not a thing that exists in the SOQ. That's a Chesterfield item and therefore is all locally funded and is not captured in SOQs as an example. Nurses, clinics, not represented in SOQs either. That's something that we've leaned into. I know Henrico, other divisions have as well. Another example of things that aren't included in the SOQ that are critical to running an appropriate school. So now looking at findings and recommendations. This gets a little dense. I'll summarize this for you here, but generally speaking, what the JLARC did is they grouped their findings and recommendations into 4 groups: SOQ formula, staffing and cost calculations, cost drivers, state and local share, LCI, and formula use and design. I'll talk about each of these in turn, and I'll remind you that the full 200-page report is available online. I'll provide a link to that at the end should you want to dive deeper into that. I got a copy of it here if anyone wants to see it. The first thing I'll talk about, as I mentioned, SOQ formula, staffing and cost calculations. At a high level, the formula assumes fewer staff than are needed. You saw that on the benchmark. There were several Great Recession era adjustments to the formula that quite frankly are dated. And lastly, salary assumptions are understated. I noticed Dr. Huff's number of 55,000 as a step 0 bachelor teacher. The average assumption for the staffing models and the SOQ models today is like 53,000. So our lowest level first entry teacher would make 55. The state assumes our average teacher makes 53 at the elementary level as an example. Looking at what does that mean from the recommendations, there's a lot of words on here. I'll summarize the 4 big ones on here. They want the state to look at staffing ratios that more accurately reflect how divisions are staffed. You see that's close to $2 billion ask right there. I mentioned this is 3 to 4. That's a big piece of it. They recommend eliminating the support cap and some of those other recessionary adjustments, another $500 million or so. Not surprisingly, use salary cost assumptions that reflect current salaries. And there's even a statutory goal in Virginia to achieve at or above national average salaries. So their recommendation would be to actually target that in the budget process. Moving forward to cost drivers, the big thing here is funding appears low, not just overall, but specifically targeting high-risk populations. At-risk or low-income, English learners, special education. So not surprising, they're recommending looking at that more closely. They recognize that special education especially is very complicated. They didn't go forward and say, here's the recommended answer, but recommended that we look at that a lot closer and work with the Board of Ed and VDOE to come up with a new method to calculate special ed needs especially. The middle one is a little bit more of a tactical point, so I'll skip that one, but the last one, I've mentioned this to this board before, they would actually recommend using the identified student percentage to calculate at-risk populations rather than the free and reduced population, as that method tends to be dated, especially as schools become CEP eligible and the free and reduced population becomes dated. That's $250 million just on that assumption change alone. The other area of cost drivers is around cost of living. They call it cost of competing. The current model doesn't reflect the current conditions across the state, quite frankly. There's really only a cost of living adjustment for a handful of counties in Northern Virginia. And other one, which doesn't really affect us, is the SOQ formula. Really doesn't account for very small, less than 2,000 student districts very well either. So the recommendation, not surprisingly, is to apply a cost of competing or cost of living adjustment as appropriate across the state, including Central Virginia. And lastly, to address the small division issue, I won't spend much time on that as that doesn't apply here. I did mention LCI. They generally thought it worked, and you can read in the formula that it generally does. However, they would recommend using a 3-year average rather than our current methodology of every biennium using a single year. It would smooth some of the transitions, especially for a smaller district, which may see more fluctuation in the LCI, which again, to remind the board, that's what drives the state versus local share of that funding. And the last one and the big one, formula use and design. Largely, this says SOQ formula reflects budget decisions and not necessarily what's needed to run a school. And the model itself, and you probably are not surprised by this one, is overly complex, creating issues both for divisions to understand as well as policymakers to implement. So what do they recommend? A simpler model at the end of the day. I mentioned earlier that there are a number of states that have simpler, better models. Those are generally student-driven formulas. X student is worth Y dollars in the formula. With a few adjustments to that, they'd recommend moving towards that model, depending on how you implement and how broadly that's applied. You can see here somewhere between $500,000 and $1.2 billion if they were to shift the entire model over to that model. So I spent a lot of time walking through this. These are JLARC, as I said, recommendations. The state is taking these under advisement now. As of the General Assembly vote, they have agreed to continue to look at this more closely. I have provided here a link to both the JLARC presentation and the full report for the board to look at and consider. And I think it's also worth noting, I have mentioned the General Assembly a couple times here. I'm happy to say that they did come together and vote up a budget deal. We are still waiting for the governor's signature. on that, and of course, a calc tool at the back end of that to understand what the impact of that updated state budget is on CCPS, and I'll look forward to coming back to the board hopefully soon with that updated information, as I know I can't give a state presentation without at least acknowledging that there has been progress on our actual budget, although we still don't have an answer yet. So with that, I will pause for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meister. Board members, any discussion?
I just have to say that the $3 to $4 billion underfunding that the state has for education in Virginia, I think speaks volumes to them wanting to complain about the lack of progress of students in the last couple of years during the pandemic. Someone needs to tell them they get what they pay for.
Where do I start? This report was so validating. On the campaign trail, I had heard this from many educator friends, and I had also heard there was waste, fraud, and abuse, right? So to hedge my bets and be prepared for either situation, when knocking doors, I specifically targeted more conservative doors to test out the message, right? So, for example, if schools were underfunded, because ultimately you would need a revenue stream, like would you support a meals tax? And what I found, in my mind, I was preparing for the meals tax campaign that was to come because the majority of the Board of Supervisors candidates, in forums suggested they would support a meals tax. So I prepared for winning that by having those conversations at conservative doors. There was strong support. Just in case there was waste, fraud, and abuse, this whole board sat through a review of the budget. Everyone here will remember it was during COVID, and how many hours? I don't even remember how many hours, and some of us did it twice just to make sure there wasn't some money under a mattress somewhere that somebody was hiding. And we made some hard cuts based on that. One that was personal to me was the wellness coordinators. Because if you have to choose between a nurse in every school and a wellness coordinator and things are tight, you choose a nurse in every school. But it wasn't a lot of money. The cuts were not millions of dollars. And ultimately, this whole board, and all of us have many times reiterated that we are unanimous, regardless of personal political party affiliation or non-affiliation, believe schools are underfunded. And yet, we still hear the waste, fraud, and abuse line. So when this came out, I actually got a call from a couple folks that used to push me on waste, fraud, and abuse, and their comment was, wow. So it's just, I'm preaching to the choir. I don't know if anybody that is not deeply into education is going to go and read this report. I don't know if anybody's going to stand at the bus stop and say, hey, you should really read the JLARC report. But the only way that we are going to rightly fund schools in this county is for everyone to understand what the five of us and Dr. Doherty and everybody, all the educators in this room, deeply understand that, as Ms. Bailey said, you get what you pay for, right? We are underfunded. We're really good at hiding it because teachers are so committed and they go the extra mile, and so does everybody else here, from Dr. Fry in transportation and Dr. Huff, who just squeezes resources out of nowhere. So I needed this because sometimes when people ask you to find the money under your mattress, you wonder, am I the only one are we the only one who notices this? And this is the proof there isn't anything to cut. We need to put our money where our mouth is. If we care about an intelligent democracy, then we need to fund schools, and we have to stop with the sound bites that represent the minority. And I know that because I knocked doors and tested out the message. So, sorry, I had to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, sorry, I did have one quick question. When you mentioned that there were other states that were doing different funding models that were simpler, which states were those?
I
Do you
don't
remember what they
remember
said?
them off the top of my
Okay.
head, but there's 20 or 30 that are using some
Okay.
version of the state.
Didn't know if
It's a lot.
you recall.
There's actually a map in the book. I'll forward it to you.
Oh, is it?
offline, yeah.
Okay. All right, just curious. All right, thank you very much. Next, we have a summer maintenance update from Mr. Carson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to give you a review of what we all have accomplished this past summer. But before I get started, I'd like to introduce you very briefly to a lot of folks who helped make all of this happen. My staff. If you all wouldn't mind standing up, please. Now, I brought my glasses, but I don't think I'll need them. Here I have Meg Lawrence, Brian Haskins, Kathy Sylvia, Mitchell Cox, Melissa Newman, Ed Allen, Sean Watson, and in the back row, Laura Toothman, Jason McDonald, and Chase Smith. I have a few folks who were not able to make it today because they are on some well-deserved PTO. We have had a tremendous summer, and you all can sit down. Okay, but thank you again. These guys are they're awesome. But I'm happy to tell you that we had our first meeting today planning for summer of '24. You know, just a few days into the school year. Thanks, Dr. D, for that mission. And yeah, we'll take that on heartedly. Anyway, we have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of projects that we worked on. But before we get to that, and I feel like I'm just picking up a baton from Mr. Meister just now because we're talking about funding. And I think it's very important to see here the success we've had in the major maintenance program. And keep in mind, this is separate from our capital efforts. This is strictly the major maintenance efforts that were identified over time as, through our FCA process of, facilities needing upgrading, maintenance, or special initiatives that Dr. D has handed down to my department to execute. But I'm happy to tell you that in fiscal 20 is when Josh Davis and I first arrived here, and we spent $17 million that year. That was pretty amazing because in years prior to that, it really wasn't all that much. But you can see by the numbers here how we've really escalated our spending. I know that might not be apropos given what we just heard, but we have a lot to do. And this year, we're actually on track. The number there says we've spent $4.49 million as of the end of August, but actually, as of this morning, we're just shy of $5.9 million spent in this fiscal year. That's just over 2 months. So we are burning, in a positive way, about $2.5 million per month just to cover the major maintenance, special projects, and security initiatives that are underway here at the district. It's a pretty significant amount. We've encumbered close to $20 million, meaning that money is reserved for spending, with about $48 million in the bank. And what does this all mean? You might be asking, well, within 24 to 27 months, we will be at zero. We have a $6.4 million transfer to our budget this fiscal year, projected to be just a bit north of that next year, but we're going to run out of money pretty soon, and we still have plenty to do. And from the photos I'm going to show you here in just a minute, we're just scratching the surface. So let's get started. Our front doors are important, but our parking lots, access drives, bus loops, things of that nature, district-wide, some are in a state of disrepair. We've paid special attention this summer to the Matoaka district and focused on 3 sites in that area: Cosby, Matoaka Middle School, and Grange Hall Elementary. We actually had 2 projects over at Grange Hall Elementary this year. Spent just north of $500,000, really on curb appeal type projects, but also enhancing the safety of the parking lots and obviously the curb appeal to the public. But we do this every year. Some years we spend a little bit more than this. This is actually a fairly light year for our department. I mentioned security, a big push here since Josh and I arrived a few years ago. Safety and security is paramount to the success of any school operation. So starting last spring, we identified 5 schools and have completed new vestibules in each of those 5. Many of well, they're actually across the county. But if you go to Cosby, Clover Hill, Matoaka, Meadowbrook today, you'll see that the vestibules function much like a new CIP effort. You come into the office, you get your Raptor badge, you go back out into the general population before engaging with the faculty, staff, and students. These are very important to us, but we have 27 more of them to do, and we finished a few of them that were just simple door projects here in the spring and summer, but we are undertaking these partly as our own general contractor and partly by hiring general contractors. There's a really broad spectrum of ways we're addressing this, but the goal here is to have everything addressed by the end of the summer 2024. And you can see over at James River, Tomahawk Middle School, Marguerite Christian, we are district-wide trying to make these vestibules secure and our schools a bit safer. And I really thank our PMs who are just tirelessly dedicated to this work. Security cameras go hand in hand with other security improvements. Obviously, it seems like every year we're rolling over new security camera, and not to mention access control and security asset manager boxes. We are in the midst of 16 elementary schools, upgrading them this calendar year. And after we're done with those, we're addressing 3 high schools, Monacan, L.C. Bird, and Meadowbrook. And after that, we'll have 3 more, and more after that too. This is a constant churn. This equipment, it ages out fairly quickly within 6 to 8 years of its installation, so you really have to keep up and running on the camera systems. We're well underway with this, okay? We don't just think about security, we think about other systems too, like HVAC. James River, believe it or not, its systems are at the end, or were at the end of their useful life, really just a couple of years ago. We have undertaken a significant job in upgrading the entire HVAC suite at this high school. And keep in mind, Manchester High School is the same vintage as James River, and we've already done work there, probably about to do more here in the not too distant future. But really a significant lift, about a year of planning went into this, and starting in the spring, 18 rooftop units, huge cranes around the perimeter of the building, over 200 variable air volume boxes, hot and cold water piping, new building controls, a price tag north of $8 million just for one school. We have roughly 70 now, many of which are newer, but this is a churn that's going to continue into the not too distant future. But when you see the price tag to update one school, you can just imagine what it's going to cost down the road. Roof restoration, we have to have something for those rooftop units to sit on, but we've got a lot of roof deck across the county. We're very fortunate that we've connected with a contractor called Tremco. They've introduced us to a process called RECODE, meaning that as we work with our facilities friends across the hall in their PM program, they can actually identify roofs that are not quite at the end of their useful life, and we can apply a 2-coat liquid process that hardens, solidifies, and gives us 25 to 30 more years life on one of our roofs, as long as it's a flat membrane roof. We'll extend our useful life, we'll extend our warranty at a portion of the cost of a full re-roof. Plus, we've worked with our environmental health and safety friends to ensure that we can actually do this process while school is in session with the proper precautions. So we can get a lot more of this roof work done Evergreen, Chalkley, and Meadowbrook all benefited from this year, and we did Falling Creek Elementary and Matoaka Middle last year. So we see this process continuing to flow. We do, however, sometimes run into reconstruction, and there were portions of Chalkley and Meadowbrook this year that we had to fully tear off and put back on. But we've got some new and interesting contract vehicles where we can work with some contractors who are typically outside of our current system, Whitley, Roof Services of Virginia, to do these full tear-offs and re-roofs within our shortened summer period and get the schools back open and running by August 15th, more or less. So these are great efforts. Chalkley's wrapped up. Meadowbrook is such a huge project. We actually have to come back next summer and do the second half of that, given our summer window. But we're well underway. We've got a great PM for this work. Locker pods. I'm sure you all have heard about our mega trailers and our enrollment issues, but Tomahawk Creek Middle School and Elizabeth Davis Middle School took the old locker pods, just like we did with the high schools a few years ago, and converted 18 spaces, I think that's right, 18 spaces into new classrooms or refurbished classrooms. Kids just don't use lockers that much anymore, so why not take advantage of that space and create new inside the building conditioned space for our students to learn. And we work directly with the principals, customize these spaces in some cases, specifically down at Davis for their learning patterns, and they're up and running today. Tight window, great contractors, hard work, but students benefit, and that's what my folks are all about. Okay. We do, however, still have plenty of mega trailer work to do. In fact, that's what our conversation was about earlier today. We had 2 installed this summer over at Hopkins Elementary and 1 new 10 classroom mega trailer installed over at Mosley Elementary School. We're very fortunate to get this work started early last fall and have these open and ready for business prior to the start of school this year. We were very, very grateful for that. And so are the students. Solar power, we've just wrapped up, or close to wrapping up wave 1 of our PPA at the first number of sites here. Mosley's coming very soon. But I believe the county has just signed the ink on wave 2, the next 6 solar installations. That work should be starting within the next few short months. But we're very much looking forward to seeing this at some of our existing sites. And keep in mind, every new CIP effort that we have, we are looking at making that solar ready. So Falling Creek Middle School, West Area Middle School, AM Davis, every new building we have coming down the pipeline, we're going to make solar ready. So we'll add that to our portfolio. And we just started getting our bills a few weeks ago. So reduced rate, it's all working good. Okay. Finally, we love to collaborate with our friends over in the Park and Rec department. So Park and Recs, they led an effort, to put the synthetic turf down over at L.C. Byrd and Monacan High School. And we acted as liaison to Park and Rec for school-related needs. And the ribbon cutting, or I guess the turf cutting, over at L.C. Byrd happened a week or 2 ago, and I think Monacan is happening in a week or 2. This week. They're my neighbors, I should know. But we worked very, very closely with their PM, who unfortunately left Park and Rec and is now down in Nashville. So we kind of took over toward the end of the project, made sure these things came to closure on time. And we're actually over at LC Byrd. If you've been over there recently, we've since the turf is opened, we've actually scraped down the rubber and the asphalt, recoated the asphalt, and we're going to put a new track in LC Byrd before the start, ideally before the start of spring track this year. So you give us a task, my people are ready to go, no holds barred. We like to get things done. But very happy about that project. So that's the summary of this summer, but we hope to come back soon, maybe quarterly, and tell you about more of the fun stuff we're doing and more of the ways we're spending the county's time, resources, and money to the penny and wisely. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Board members, any discussion? Ryan?
I just want to say thank you, because I'll just tell you that prior to 2020, there was a lot of maintenance issues in schools. and I think this board and whatever board comes after us needs to continue to advocate. I mean, more buildings, where more buildings are coming online, that dollar amount's going to need to go up if we want to make sure that our buildings stay in the current condition that they're in. So I just think that it's important, and I want to thank you and your team for everything that I've seen you guys do over the last 3 years. So thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to put because people might having seen the JLARC presentation, where did all that money come from? Just that it was the federal COVID dollars that came to Chesterfield. Also, the Board of Supervisors received COVID dollars, shared them with us. There was a county floated a bond referendum to help us do, and why were we in this mess? Because the underfunding, right? When you don't get what you need, then you don't do maintenance. And a silver lining of COVID was all the money, including the county bond referendum that let us get up to speed. But it would be a waste of taxpayer money if, as Mr. Harder said, we don't maintain the progress. Then it we'll be back where we started with non-functioning HVAC units, et cetera, et cetera. So we need a revenue source. Money doesn't just fall from the sky.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carson. Appreciate your presentation. Friday, Monacan High School, turf field ribbon cutting, 6:30. It's the hottest ticket in town. And I wanted to, aside from all of this great work that you're doing, and I love seeing that we're, again, thinking outside of the box, right? And with the solar panels and the resurfacing of the roofs. This is all going to carry us, it'll carry us through, but it won't carry us across the finish line, right? Because as you're saying, if we don't, the way that we're budgeting for major maintenance, we will run out in 24 to 25 months. Did I hear you correctly?
24 to 30, depending on how fast inflation rises.
Right. So I'm sure that is at the top of all of our minds as we go forward into, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're talking about budget season already, but. You buried the lead. Falling Creek Middle School. I think we all had a blast. It was just absolutely wonderful to see. First of all, the progress was absolutely staggering over, from a year ago when it was dirt, and now there's a building. What a beautiful facility, and I can't wait to see it keep coming along. But thanks for taking the time to show us the building. Individually, we all had an opportunity to tour the construction site, and I appreciate your time and your efforts in that respect as well.
Great team there. Great team there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you to our tour guides, some of you in the back there. Greatly appreciated that.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of a quarterly update. I think it's good to see all the hard work that your team is doing and be able to, boast about it. So thank you very much, Mr. Carson. Next, we have a transportation update with Dr. Fry.
Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Daugherty, and Mr. Roberts, it's my pleasure this afternoon to talk about one of my favorite subjects, transportation. So improving school transportation is always a top priority for us, and our bus drivers and our staff are key to that. Ultimately, our goal is to get our students to school on time and ready for them to start their day learning. Today, I'd like to talk to you about our progress last year, our arrival times, which are a factor of our training and recruiting, as well as our improvement in our efficiencies. We'd also like to talk about communications, where we are with our stop arms, and let's look ahead a couple years as we plan. So last year, we saw continuous improvement in our on-time arrival rates. In transportation, we're always shooting for 100%. Always. Every day, we're looking for ways to improve. Our imagined tomorrow goal is 97%. Because regardless, even when we're finally completely staffed, there'll be things that we cannot control, such as, a breakdown, a down power line. Numerous things can interrupt your travel from point A to point B. We started off doing well. We ended in the fourth quarter with an overall on-time arrival rate of 96%. So we're really close to that goal by the end of last year. How does that break down? In the fourth quarter of that 4%, the majority of the students that were late, our buses were late, were only late between 1 and 10 minutes. Almost 1%, not quite, were late between 11 and 20 minutes. And then out of the 4,500 and some arrivals, only a small fraction, 1/3%, were late more than 20 minutes. We have a world-class training team, and we train a lot of drivers. Last year, our training team hired, trained, and put into buses 149 drivers. We're already on track to surpass that, having trained and put onto buses 55 drivers just since the beginning of the fiscal year, so in the last 2 months. I've got to say at this opportunity, take this opportunity to say thank you to our HR team back there. Your recruiting has been amazing, and it's with their hard work that we get them into the class and then we get them into the buses. Training continues for our drivers once they get into the buses. We do have mentors that stay with the drivers for as long as they feel comfortable. It's usually a few days, but then they continue by checking in on them over the course of the month. The second biggest, most important thing that we do to improve our arrival times is our improving efficiencies. And the way we do that is by having accurate data. We're a data-driven department. Our ridership data is key to number of buses we need, the number of drivers we need, which is a factor of the correct number of students that we place on each bus, as well as the number of double backs. The better our data is, the better we are efficient-wise. This continues all year long as we work with schools to tweak our ridership numbers. One of the biggest tools that we have is our Tyler Drive system, our Tyler Drive tablets. As students are logged on and off of these, we're able to count the number of students at each stop and who is actually riding. So throughout the year, we are improving our routes and the number of students that are on these to be more efficient so we can reduce the number of routes that we have. Last year, between January and April, we were able to reduce the number of routes by 54 routes. That's huge. That means that many less double backs. That means multiple drivers we didn't need to hire to cover them. And it meant folks getting on time more regularly. And that was one of the main things that saw the improvement up to 96%. We have several communication platforms that we are happy to have this year. The first is Aptigee, which is our communication platform for messaging parents about the status of our buses, about route changes. It's working very well, and we're happy to have that. We're also very excited about our web-based form. It's called Messaging the Transportation Department. If you go to our website, folks can give us the information that we need in order to direct it to the correct person to help them out quickly. Communication over the phones has always been an issue. It would rain and the phones would go out. This year, we're very fortunate to be the first department to try out a new web-based phone system that has allowed us to better communicate with those that are trying to get in touch with us. Not only is it web-based, which makes it more reliable, it also has a better voicemail system, and it has the ability to direct you through your choices to the right areas as well. Stop arm cameras are something that we've been working on for a long time, and we're very excited that these are finally in the RFP stages, and we're hoping that this will be implemented in spring to summer. Once we do that, we're really expecting the safety of our students to increase as we deter vehicles from running their stop arms. Looking ahead, we're always looking ahead. We're already planning for next year and the years beyond. In August 2024, Bensley will move to the Fallen Creek Middle campus, and Fallen Creek Middle is on Tier 1. Bensley is currently on Modified First. We really can't have our buses trying to use the same area at the same time, so we're really going to need to look at changing where Bensley falls as far as the tier goes. More than likely, it'll move to Tier 2, potentially Tier 3 to balance the buses. In August 2025, we're looking forward to our Western Area Middle School because it'll be opening in August of 25. During the year prior, we'll be looking at changing where schools are in the tiers. All the middle schools will go to first tier, high schools remain on second, most of the elementary will be on third, and there will need to be some elementaries moved to the other tiers in order to balance our buses. So again, continual improvement is our goal. And with your support and our bus drivers and our staff, we will get our students to school on time and ready to learn. Thank you. I'll now take any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. Fry. Board members, any discussion? Ms. Bailey?
I just have a comment, and that is if continued improvement is your goal, you have met your goal. In the 4 years I've been on this board, schools open 4 times, I have received 1 email about transportation. It is like crazy compared to the first year I was on the board and every year after, and then it just blew up for 2 years there for a while, and now it's just like crickets. And I love it.
Ms. Bailey, knock on wood, quick.
That's right. But amazing. Dr. Fry, you've done an amazing job. The start of this year literally was the smoothest transportation-wise from my perspective of any of the other years prior. So congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it, but honestly, I can't take the credit for it. This has been a complete school-wide effort. The transportation department appreciates your support. You know, we couldn't do our job without your support. Dr. Daugherty, everybody in this room, frankly, our staff that work literally 12 hours a day, 5 days a week to keep our offices running, all had a hand in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Next, we have an ERP modernization update from Ms. Aldis.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Dr. Daugherty, distinguished members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, the ERP replacement or modernization. So what is an ERP? An enterprise resource planning refers to a type of software that organizations use to manage their day-to-day business activities, such as accounting, accounts payable, payroll, human resources, fixed assets, risk management, compliance, etc. Right? So an ERP system ties together a multitude of business processes and enables the flow of data between them. They eliminate the need for data duplication, they provide data integrity, and create a single source of truth. These advanced technologies create new opportunities for increased efficiencies, new services, and deeper insights across an enterprise. A complete ERP suite also includes enterprise performance management software that help with planning, budgeting, predictive analysis, and reporting on an organization's financial and operational health. So an overview of the project. Finance Enterprise, or Central Square, as you may recognize, is our current ERP system. It supports financials, human resources, and payroll for both the county as well as the schools. It has been in place for 15 years. I'm just going to pause for a second. Technology that has been in place for 15 years. As you can imagine, it's reaching the end of its useful life, and that's putting it nicely. Changes in requirements, changes in technology, and most recently, issues encountered as a recent migration took place have impacted the efficiencies of several business areas, most notably payroll. Initial funding was provided to initiate the process of replacing our current system by hiring a consulting firm, Barry Dunn, to conduct interviews on current processes and current system limitations. To protect the integrity of the procurement process, I am not at liberty to share the specific details, but what I can tell you is this. We are in the fourth and final stage of the procurement process. The new ERP will continue to support both schools and county. This project is in the top 5 projects on the county's technology project portfolio. Funding has been appropriated for FY24, and the RFP committee has been engaged in multiple rounds of product demonstrations and interviews. If you've ever been part of a procurement process for a system, to even meet one particular business function, you would understand the complexity involved. Imagine searching for a system to support 10 unique business functions that all have to talk to each other. This is a monumental task. We recognize, or the committee recognizes, that implementing a new ERP will transform the way that we do business. For this reason, that committee took their time with due diligence and took it very seriously. To give you an idea of the business functions that we are looking to support with the new ERP, under human capital management would be items such as applicant tracking, compensation, human resources and personnel management, learning and performing management, benefit administration, time and attendance, and my favorite, payroll. On the financial side of the house, consider procurement, contract management, accounts payable, accounts receivable, cash management, project accounting, grants management, fixed assets, and inventory. As mentioned previously, enterprise performance management. A tool like this will gather greater data for better insights into such items as planning, strategic modeling, budgeting, both operational and capital, narrative reporting, such as the ACFR and budget books, financial consolidation, account reconciliation, and just overall enterprise data management. So looking ahead, we are still expecting at least an 18 to 24-month implementation. We are going to break this into 2 phases. We are intending to target human capital management first, but it will depend on the vendor awarded. We do target to start this calendar year, but again, timing is dependent upon the actual contract award. In the 2-year implementation period, we will continue to provide support for the existing ERP and perform required maintenance. During this time, we cannot rule out the need to upgrade our current ERP system. A key factor in the success of implementing an ERP is to ensure that key knowledgeable staff are dedicated to the implementation project. For this reason, enhancement to the existing ERP will be limited. The most successful ERP implementations involve looking at processes end to end. Every step, not just the technology behind it, but the actual supporting policies. This means that we will need to transform the way that we do business. Shifting from customization to configuration will be key. What does this mean? So modern solutions work because the system is consistent for all the users. It results in regular updates to take advantage of the most current technology. Configuration is using the system as it is delivered to meet a requirement. Customization is when you actually change the system to conform to your unique needs. Once you start customizing, you reduce the ability to leverage new technology, innovations, and ideas, and it becomes difficult to maintain, as evidenced by the situation we are in with our current ERP. We will need to change policies and procedures to ensure that we focus on best practices with the goal to standardize practices across all departments with minimal exception. This is where I'm going to need your support the most. I'll just pause there because this is where I will need your support the most. Okay, so to manage the support of an existing system, an implementation of a new system, as well as organizational change, we will need a strong project team. So let me introduce you to the project team. In a single enterprise, it is required for a strong partnership amongst all the leaders. But in our case, we also need a strong partnership with our friends at the county. So to introduce to you the executive sponsor, Matt Harris, Deputy County Administrator, will be performing that role. Consuela Wilson, Director of Accounting, will be the project owner. Our project steering committee will be comprised of members from both the schools and county, with the major objective of monitoring the scope, the budget, the schedule, and any policy changes and key staff resource allocations. So from the county, we have Consuela Wilson, Director of Accounting. From schools, Robert Meister, Chief Finance Officer. From the county, Mary Martin Selby, Director of Human Resources. From schools, Dr. Kimberly Huff, Chief Human Resources Officers. From the county, Stephanie Brown, the Director of Procurement. From the county, Gerard Durkin, Director of Budget. From the county, Scott Furman, Chief Information Officer. And from the schools, Aaron Ford, Technology Director. The size and the scope of this project warrants a project management team rather than just a project manager. So from the county, we have Angela Borum. From the schools, we have Leah Underwood. And from the county IST, we have Rick Miley. There will be several functional and technical work streams that will be finalized once the contract is awarded, which will be led by the 3 previously mentioned project managers. As I stressed before, organizational change management is essential for this project. Kevin Burney and myself will work jointly together to develop a business readiness, strategy, and communication plan. The most recent activity on this project was on August 23rd, where the Board of Supervisors authorized the Director of Procurement, Stephanie Brown, to award the contract for the ERP and any necessary change orders up to the budgeted amount for this project. The budgeted amount, which was $12,747,000. That concludes my update for the ERP modernization project. I will take any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aldis. Board members, is there any discussion? Well, I will just say.
It sounds like a nightmare.
Ann likes it.
I love it.
Ann is really into it.
I honestly didn't
Yeah.
expect to get any excitement, so thank
Well-
you for, except for
I was-
Ann, except for Ann.
I was
But
going to
we've-
say, I'm probably just
we've
as
had our-
happy as you are
Yes.
that this is coming. I remember our first conversation 4 years ago, and to hear that paper was still being pushed for time entry.
It still is today.
It blew my mind.
Carbon copy paper.
Carbon copy,
Carbon
yes.
copy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is a long time coming, but
It
it's
is a
going to
long-
be fabulous, not only for your support staff, but the entire school division is going to feel the benefit from this, so.
It is daunting, I won't
Thank you.
kid you, but
Yeah,
it's,
it will
I'm more excited than I am nervous,
Yeah.
just for the future. I can't imagine how amazing it will be when we have the data at our fingertips to truly
Absolutely.
make data-driven decisions and support it with facts, right?
Yeah.
And Paula, I was just going to say thank you for being a champion of this. Like Ms. Coker, I think we've, I've at the Audit and Finance Committee meetings, I think 4 years ago, right, we were talking about this, and you've always kept your eye on the ball, and you have definitely shepherded this through a lot, and I appreciate you. It sounds like I can speak for us when I say we appreciate you. Thank you so much for
My
your work
pleasure.
on this.
Yeah, thank you.
So my one ask, again, always thinking with the next board, I think that in addition, of course, to Anne being our champion, given her financial background, also we had champions with extensive professional expertise on both the Audit and Finance Committee and the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, kind of saying, school board, you need to keep this your priority. Even when it was like, is it even possible to come up with a system that can work for both county and schools? So just like with the subs, we don't want this to fail. So will you have a budget ask coming with the next budget? Like, is your existing team enough to implement this size of a project?
Human capital, is that your question? Our resources from the human capital side or the financial side?
Do you have what you, it's connected, right? Like, do you have the team that you need to implement this successfully? And if not, you do need to add, like, for example, with substitute, they mentioned, the person who is dedicated to hiring subs, that was key. Do you need additional people on your team?
Yes. To answer your question, yes. We have recently, we are actually augmenting our current staff. When I say ours, I mean the collective ours, with human resources by 5. The county is funding those 5 positions through the budget that they have set aside. So we have 2 ERP admin coming in, one in HR as a specialist, one in my finance data team as a specialist. We have a benefits specialist. That was the most recent ad, was we actually went to the county and requested additional resources, and they actually conceded one of theirs for the benefits portion. And then we have one additional to backfill the payroll director so that we can implement. Is that enough? To be determined. We need the expertise. If we get too big, it could become unwieldy, but that is part of the conversation, ongoing conversation during this implementation, is constantly taking a temperature, if you will, of capacity to ensure that we put forth this is an investment. This is an investment in the future. And so we will keep our finger on that pulse for the entire project. But to date, 5 positions.
Please do. Politicians aren't always so great with larger upfront costs that take longer to pay off, but this is critical. So,
Yes.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have an AED expansion update from Dr. Murray and Ms. Snyder.
Remote control authority to you. I rarely do that. Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Doherty. There were some questions at last month's meeting pertaining to AEDs, access, replacements, et cetera. As such, Ms. Snyder and I are here tonight to provide some updates and information pertinent to AED resources available within CCPS, as well as perhaps a snapshot of where we were, where we are, and where we're heading. Oh, look at you, you're already there. So for background purposes to the general public who may be tuning in, we're discussing automated external defibrillators, which are portable life-saving devices designed to intervene for emergencies involving sudden cardiac arrest as these devices in combination with CPR effectively save lives when used in the first minutes following sudden cardiac arrest events. Additionally, an AED is an automated computerized medical device programmed to analyze heart rhythm, recognize rhythms that require defibrillation, and provide visual and voice instructions for the device operator, including, if indicated, to deliver an electric shock. The county and school standard AED product is the Zoll AED Plus, which you'll learn a bit more about shortly. Sudden cardiac arrest is a leading cause of death of athletes during sports. Recent high-profile sudden cardiac emergencies, such as with Damar Hamlin and Bronny James, have provided a necessary point of reflection for the division to reassess our efforts and overall preparedness, as both athletes were saved because of the use of an AED. Recent legislation passed this year codified the expectation that AEDs are to be installed in all schools. But you will be pleased to know that CCPS was forward-thinking and already ahead of the game, placing several AEDs in schools about 15 years ago. As well, we created cardiac emergency response plans, placed in crisis manuals and shared with EMS, as well as the existing risk management operational guide.
These are the two AED unit models that we currently have in our buildings. The top green model is the AED, the Zoll Plus model, and the one on the bottom is the Philips Heart Start. The Zoll AED is the preferred model for the county. We have about just over 200 units in our school buildings. That is also what our county EMS partners use. So if we would need to use an AED in our school buildings, when EMS arrived, we could simply interchange the pads with their units instead of having to remove the pads and replace them with a different model. So the Philips models are primarily found in our high schools, with the exception of the CTC at Hull and Thomas Dale. They already have the Zoll units in their buildings. So we're looking at phasing out the Philips models, replacing them with Zolls so that we can be in line with what EMS is using as well. Placement of AEDs, we currently have them available in all of our school buildings, including our virtual school. The athletic trainers, in addition, carry an AED out for sporting events. So most of our high schools have an extra AED also found in the field house. I'm happy to tell you we were able to purchase additional AEDs so that each middle school has one available to take out for outdoor after-school events as well. In addition to school buildings, AEDs can also be found in our transportation offices, trailers, food service building, and school board office as well. The number of AEDs varies based on the size and layout of each building, but what we strive for is an optimal response time of 3 minutes, and that means you should be able to get anywhere in the building from your victim to the AED and back within 3 minutes. All of our AEDs last year were added to the County EMS Pulse Point app, and what that does, if somebody calls 911 and is in need of an AED, they can direct them to the closest location where one is located. Maintenance of AEDs currently is completed by the school nurses in the school buildings. The AEDs that are located in off-site offices, there's a designated personnel in those buildings that's responsible for completing those monthly checks, and that includes making sure that the unit is in good working order. I encourage everybody, when you walk past an AED, to make sure you see that little green check in the corner. If any time you see a red X, please let the nurse know. It means that we need to replace the batteries and make sure that it's fully functioning. We also check to make sure that all of the pads, we check their expiration dates, and then there's also an emergency pack which contains gloves, scissors, a barrier face mask, things that you would need to perform CPR. Our current budget for replacement of AED pads and batteries for the county is $15,000, and that's the responsibility of Student Health Services. To give you an idea of replacement costs, of course, with inflation, everybody's experienced over the last couple years, our costs have skyrocketed. So for the Zoll pads, It's about $103 for a pediatric pad and $186 for adults, and the battery replacement is about $40. For our Philips, the pads are much cheaper, at about $100, but the batteries are about $181 for each unit. Another reason to phase out the Philips is make ordering streamlined for just one model. So where we plan to go from here, priority is replacing our Philips AEDs with the Zoll model. They are some of our oldest models. Even though they are older, they are still in good functioning working order. These are the two models that we are looking at. The AED Plus is what we currently have, and the AED 3 is the newest Zoll brand. The cost is a little higher. This is our county contracted cost as well. The AED 3 does have a longer battery and pad life. It's about 5 years between replacement, whereas with the Zoll Plus, we're replacing pads and batteries every 2 years, 2.5 years.
So current guidelines and legislative expectations do not extend, excuse me, beyond the brick and mortar facilities. However, the image displayed is an example of how we as a division may continue to enhance general safety. These outdoor AED cabinets, which carry great benefit, as listed on the slide, do carry a cost of around $1,300. These are currently installed at the pickleball courts about Chesterfield County and the parks. However, we have been in communication with Parks and Rec to discuss shared facilities and shared expenses regarding expanding this initiative to all shared facilities between the county and the school division. In the meantime, it's important to note that every secondary school has at least one designated AED for portable use, high schools multiple, to support outside activities. This is not a current requirement, so again, highlighting CCPS's effort to go above and beyond for student safety. As well, every AED located inside of a school building may be removed from its locker mount and used to support evening events such as athletics, while we procure additional AEDs specifically designated for outdoor use. So some improvements that we've installed for the 23-24 school year and beyond. Heather and her team of exceptional nurses have conducted surveys and needs assessments at every CCPS facility. As well, they've improved visibility by way of enhanced signage around these AEDs. And then additional AED wall-mounted cabinets have been installed or are set to be installed at each high school field house. And as Heather mentioned earlier, each middle school was provided one portable unit to support after-school athletic events as well as outdoor PE activities during the school day.
And those are the signage and the cabinets are things that we're currently working on. So obviously our $15,000 budget is not enough to support purchasing additional units. So we are looking at some grant funding possibilities. We do have some money set aside through the school-based health workforce grant that was granted to Student Health Services. And there is a potential for that amount to be increased. We should know more by the end of September if there'll be additional monies coming through that grant, as well as part of the legislation that was passed did include that VDOE needs to publicly list all grant-funded opportunities and other funding sources so that schools can meet the requirements. That's should be available by next August, but hopefully we'll find out before then. Also, in addition, when we replace AEDs, they do offer a buyback program, so we do get credit for some of our older models. And the one thing I'm really excited about that we're working towards is Project Adam. We're working towards getting all of our schools a heart-safe school designation. Project Adam is a nationwide initiative to increase community access to AEDs. It began in 1999 in Wisconsin after the death of Adam Lamel, who was a 17-year-old high school student who suffered a cardiac arrest, collapsed, and died while playing basketball at school. There was no AED available, which potentially could have saved his life. So Adam's parents partnered with their local children's hospital to create Project Adam. Project Adam now reaches schools across the country in 29 states and has been responsible for saving more than 200 lives. Children's Hospital of Richmond is the first Virginia affiliate for Project Adam. So we are currently working with Dr. Phillips, who is the Director of Pediatric Electrophysiology at CHOR. All of our high school nurses have met with him, received additional training. We are hoping to implement this at high schools first and then expand to other levels. So the school nurses will be the team coordinators for each school. There is a 14 requirement checklist that each school needs to meet. Thankfully, we had a lot of those already in place, but it includes things like staff education, creating a cardiac response team, doing drills, having AEDs in place. So a lot of those we have already met. We have created a cardiac emergency response plan, which has been included, added to our division emergency response plan. And I've also shared that with Dr. Yee at EMS, and he's very supportive of this initiative as well. We know that this program is effective in improving survival because early defibrillation is critical, and the single greatest factor affecting survival time was sudden cardiac arrest. Chance of survival decreases 7 to 10% after each minute that passes after the event. So the average survival rate of an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is less than 8%, but we know that that is increased with preparedness. There was a study done by the Sports Injury Research, National Center for Catastrophic Sports Injury Research, which compared survival outcomes of adolescent male basketball players in a school-based setting versus an AAU setting. And the school-based setting where AEDs and bystander CPR was available 80 to 90% of the time, they had a survival rate of over 70% versus the public AAU venues where CPR and AED was only used less than 50%. That survival rate decreased to 38.5%. So as you can see, there is clearly an importance in being prepared and having AEDs available. We are continuing to strive to make our school communities as safe as possible, so appreciate your support in our initiatives.
Heather's happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Board members, is there any discussion? Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks.
Next, we have announcements, communications, and school board comments. School board members, are there any announcements or comments this evening? Okay. The next school board business meeting will be held this evening, September 12th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. If there's no more further public business, we will need to enter into closed session, which will be held in the public meeting room, conference room. Madam Clerk, please announce the items for today's closed session.
It is my understanding that the school board desires to enter into closed session in accordance with Section 2.2-3711.a of the Code of Virginia, the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and specifically under subsection 1, the discussion and consideration of personnel disciplinary matters, and 2, the discussion and consideration of student disciplinary matters and matters that would involve the disclosure of student records.
Members of the board, you've just heard the items requested to be discussed in closed session. Do I have a motion in that regard?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you please call roll on the motion?
Dot Heffron,
Aye.
Debbie Bailey,
Aye.
Ryan Harder,
Aye.
Catherine Haynes,
Aye.
and Coker.
Aye. We are now in closed session.